Zach Laws of Gold Derby here with Nate Heller, the composer of the new film A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. And Nate, there's so much love for Mr. Rogers, as we saw last year with the documentary Won't You Be My Neighbor. Did you and the director / your sibling, Mario Heller, feel a certain amount of responsibility to get this story right?
I think there was a tremendous amount of responsibility that we both felt to honor Fred's legacy. I think for my part of it, especially doing the music, I don't know if you know this or if your listeners know this, that Fred wrote almost all the music for the show. So between him and his band leader, Johnny Costa, they created this magical world of music. So that was our big first priority, was let's look really closely at what they did, and we'll try and get as close to exact on that as we can.
So, that's a really interesting point you bring up, because, obviously the music of the show has such a specific identity, So how did you go about trying to, not just recapture that, but, make your own score feel like it fit within the world of
Sure.
Mr. Rogers?
Yeah, we knew that there was going to be some kind of juggling act of, we're going to be recreating some of this music faithfully, and then we want the score to play off of that and maybe take us somewhere else. So just because of the way the movie was made, we had to tackle the Mr. Rogers music first so that everybody could be ready to have the tracks to sing along with when they were shooting. So that was really like an in-depth process doing that. And then we were able to sort of pick and choose what elements of this do we want to take into our score. And so my thought process was, let's use the jazz combo as sort of a foundation, so that, piano, upright bass, and drums. And then take it to some bigger places, because we were able to use, a 31-piece orchestra for parts of the score as well. So we sort of played with that Mr. Rogers jazz combo feel and tried to keep some of the whimsy while making it bigger. And then we also took little melodies that you would remember from the show and sort of weaved them in and out of the score as well.
What's so interesting about this movie is that, it's not a biopic about Mr. Rogers. It's really a story about how this one man, Lloyd Vogel, who's played by Matthew Rhys, how his life is affected and changed by the message of Mr. Rogers and through knowing him. What kind of an effect did that have on your score? The fact that, really the protagonist of your movie is somebody who I'm sure a lot of people don't even know who Lloyd Vogel is, let alone that he had this relationship with Mr. Rogers.
I think it was really interesting, and I think it really affected the way that I worked, because this is a story about someone who's struggling in their personal life to maintain their family relationships, to connect with his own young child. And Mr. Rogers plays a foil to that and helps this person tackle some of their issues. I think working on this movie, a lot of us had the experience of being forced to undergo some kind of introspection. And I have a young child. I have my young first child, and there's a lot in this film about sort of being present and taking the opportunity of being a parent to learn and see the world through your kid's eyes. So for me, that really informed the work, and I tried to sort of tap into that emotional place that is so special about having a kid, where you have this new opportunity to see the world. And I tried to let the music sort of live there.
Yeah, and it's a much darker film than I think people are expecting because of that. It deals with a lot of really heavy emotional themes that have gone on in this man's life. And can you talk a little bit about how you express that musically?
Sure. Yeah, I think that there is a lot of kind of existential dread and questions about, what do we do with the time that we have while we're here? And I think for me, weirdly, that's something that having a child really has made me focus on those big, heavy questions. I think it does that to you. So I think that we had to be able to have the sweet world of Mr. Rogers music and also be able to let it go to some darker places. So one of the things that we do is that we take some of the Mr. Rogers music and twist it and make it a little darker. And then again, some of the compositions, I just let the feeling of them go to a tenser, darker place where hopefully you feel all of that existential dread that Lloyd feels weighing down on him as well.
You mentioned how Fred Rogers composed, all the music for his show. And I wonder, I mean, when you were researching his score, what did you learn about it? I mean, what did you, were there things that surprised you about his musical compositions as you were like delving into it deeper for your own work?
Well, I mean, I think like most casual Mr. Rogers fans, which I was, you sort of think of it as like, okay, it's this fun, lighthearted world of kids' music. And then you go in and take a closer look, and it's really intricate, beautifully performed, and very kind of fluid. So we went back to the era that this movie takes place in, 1997, and we had the blessing of the Fred Rogers Foundation to have access to all these archival videos, and they provided us with Fred's original sheet music that he had written, which was incredible. But watching the footage from show to show, you realize that his band is playing it very differently every single night. And it's because they're super accomplished jazz musicians who probably just couldn't help but improvise. So I think that was something that was definitely a surprise to me. And I think that there was a real dynamic there of Fred writing really simple but beautiful chord progressions to go along with his words. And then he would hand them over to Johnny Costa, who with his band would transform them into something even more magical.
So talk a little bit about expressing the friendship between Mr. Rogers and Lloyd Vogel, the relationship that starts to grow between them gradually throughout the movie. How did you help tell that story through your music?
For me, I think their relationship, and I think what you see Fred's effect having on Lloyd throughout the film, is him helping this person be able to wrap his head around the concepts of really being able to love someone and also being able to forgive someone. So there is a theme of forgiveness that comes up early in the film and comes up a lot with Lloyd's relationship with his dad, Jerry. And I think that there was a theme there that kind of jumped out to me early. And so throughout the film, you'll hear this theme sort of coming back in Lloyd's conversations with Fred, because it's something that I feel like the character of Fred in this movie is really helping this journalist work through these issues to be able to get to a place of being able to be open and being able to love his family.
Was there a particular scene or piece of music that was hard for you to crack? And I mean, how do you get past those problem areas?
I'm trying to think of what the hard nuts to crack were. I think I have such a unique relationship working with my sister where I'm composing, as soon as I can before they shoot, as they're editing. So we have a back and forth where I'll have a piece that's in flux for a scene that's in flux. And maybe that's the challenge for me, is getting attached to a scene the way that it is. And then knowing that, okay, this is probably going to need to be tightened up. We're going to have to lose this or that from the music. That's maybe my challenge, I think, as a composer. And then as far as getting stuck, I think for me, I like to start in kind of the more meaty emotional places in the film and let those sort of inform where the rest of the score is going to go. And on this one, it was interesting because we had the world of Fred's music, and then we had a few of these meaty emotional scenes that were together early, and they kind of influenced each other to allow us to then go to the darker places, as you were saying.
I remember us talking about your relationship with Marielle when we did this last year for Can You Ever Forgive Me? I mean, you have a really unique insight into the work, because I mean, I'm sure you have tons of conversations with her before most people do about, what the film's going to be and what direction it's going to go in. And talk a little bit more about like your collaboration with her.
Yeah, I would say that it's mostly a blessing. It's like 95% a blessing, but we are family. And, up until a year and a half ago, we were roommates. She was my landlord. She lived upstairs. I lived downstairs. So on Diary, which we did together, and on Can You Ever Forgive Me, we were just right next door to each other. So there would be no me saying like, oh yeah, I'm busy, I can't get to it. She could be like, you're in your apartment right now, dude. Like, come on, let's look at the scene together. I mean, not that it ever would come to that, but yeah, I think that the big benefits of us being able to work together and when things are coming down the pike is, she's putting together her films to my demos, hopefully, which was certainly true on Can You Ever Forgive Me and was definitely true on this one too. And that's a big thing for someone in my position, because I think there is a disease out there that people call tempitis, where directors will cut their film to, score from another movie and just fall in love with it. And then you try to replace it and you'll never be able to. So I think that it's, in my mind, kind of a more pure way to work because we're trying to do it at the same time. And then it's fun because something that I write might inform the pace in terms of how her editor cuts together a scene. And then there's a back and forth as things sort of shift and move where hopefully the music sort of talks to the edit and it comes to some common ground.
It's interesting too, because like the three movies that you guys have made together, Diary of a Teenage Girl, Can You Ever Forgive Me, and now this one, they're very different movies, and you've gotten to explore different things musically with each one of them. I mean, is that part of the benefit of working with somebody like Marielle, who doesn't seem to want to do the same movie over and over again?
It is fun, and we've talked about this recently about how we both have sort of grown into this profession. Diary was her first directing debut, and it was the first time I had ever scored anything. So we were learning how to do it together, and it felt like on that one there was going to be all this wonderful music from the 70s, and the score should do something else, and they should play against each other. And I think in general, we try to make choices about the music that make sense for the film. Can You Ever Forgive Me was about Lee Israel, who loved Blossom Dearie, and even though she lived in the 90s in New York, she was in love with old jazz artists and the way the world used to be. So for us, that music had to be New Yorky, but jazzy also. And that was something that I wasn't doing a lot of. I used to do it in high school. I was in jazz band. So that's what that film kind of wanted. And then Mr. Rogers similarly was, we knew that there was going to be jazz and this kind of like stride piano current that went throughout it. But we also wanted it to go in a different direction, in a darker direction. So I think I got to put a little bit of my stamp on the darker scenes, especially. So yeah, we'll see what the next one, if she ends up doing some kind of like sci-fi annihilation and I need to go like full Hans Zimmer, let's go. I'm ready.
I think that if Mario's watching this, she just got a pitch for her next movie.
There we go. Let's do it. Monkeys in Space.
Nate Heller, thank you so much. Pleasure talking with you again. Congratulations on your work.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much.